And hi, everyone. Welcome to eLearnChat, where it is all about learning. And today we've got a different approach to learning, and you'll see how it all ties together. And with us, our co-host, good friend, it's Dr. Susan Nash. How are you, Susan?
I'm fine. It's a wonderful day. It's so beautiful.
Oh, good. Yeah, we were totally fogged in this morning, and today, now it's beautiful. We don't get fogged this time of year usually, but you never know. Never know. And in studio, we've got Harold Muliati. And Susan, would you like to introduce our guest, and then we'll hit the intro?
Great. Our guest today is a very special person today, James Geyer. He's a producer, and he will tell us more about himself and also the magical mysteries of like extinction and using documentaries and e-learning.
It sounds fun. Here we go. This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation. Visit us at www.relatecasts.net. Thanks. And we are back in what we call our center position of power. James, you didn't know we were going to be in power today, did you?
I did not, but I'm happy about it.
Yeah, it's always good. It's always fun to have a little bit of power, right? Anyway, you have a very interesting background in the kind of videos you've done and videos that are coming out soon and the one you're about to embark on. And I find it fascinating. Did you always start out as a video and film producer?
I did not. This is something that's come along later in life. I'm actually a civil engineer by college training. Yeah. And have a master's degree in international law from the University of London. So I practice a lot of dispute resolution. But I read a book about 15 years ago and just instinctively said, I need to make a movie about this.
Oh, what book which book was that one?
It was called Arrigo, Surgeon of a Rusty Knife, of which inspired our movie about Arrigo, which we did. You see the poster up above me here. In English, it's called A Dangerous Profession. In Portuguese, it's called Predestinado.
That's coming out, I think you mentioned, early next year?
That's correct. Right. Supposed to be early 2022 in Brazil, in South America.
Now, Susan, for our audience who can sometimes get confused because they're learning professionals, how do we tie in some of what James does with really the training industry? Because, like you said, documentaries and video and film are so endemic to training, too. It's not just being entertained, but there's a whole part of that industry which, I mean, frankly, every movie can train you in something, can instruct you in something, or leave you with ideas. So how do you tie it together, Susan?
Well, I think that it's really important, especially when you look at your learning objectives, to tie in not just the assessments, but also the content. And one thing that's really great about documentaries is that they generally present more than one view of the same subject. And so they keep people engaged. And then you can also intersperse like questions that either are directly about the documentary, or you can say, did you know, or check your knowledge along the way to keep people actually paying attention. But they're just fantastic, especially if they're a little bit controversial, as is the one about Chicxulub. And I think what I like about it is that it can encourage people to A, engage with each other and discuss, the students can discuss, and then B, go deeper into research to explore the different perspectives that are presented in the documentary. And so I guess just to kind of sum it up is that it's not just passive learning where you might sit and watch. For example, in the story about the asteroid impact that caused the crater Chicxulub, and that there used to be this big depression in the Caribbean, and it's the mystery of why and how that happened, and then who discovered it. those are things that are part of kind of a scientific exploration and discovery, but more than anything, kind of mystery. So I remember when I was working on my PhD, I was working on apocalyptic narratives, and I was also taking a paleoecology course and also some directed reading in geology. And that was just when a lot of the Chicxulub discourse, were the 1991 through 93, whatever, a lot of the publications, I think there was a bombshell article in Science that kind of made everything fascinated everybody, not only because of what the impact crater did, but I'll let James go into detail, but because of the impact on the world and the life that existed at the time.
And James, isn't this one of the world's largest meteoroid hits? I don't know if it's the largest one, but if not, it's very close to the largest one.
No, that's correct. Dr. Nash knows quite a bit about it. It's very interesting to listen to her speak about it. But as far as I know, it is the largest that's ever hit the Earth that people know about.
Now, do you think when it hit the Earth, because I was reading a little bit about it, some people say it had like the equivalent of X number of atomic bombs hitting it. I mean, from the speed at which it hit and the density of the asteroid, it's amazing what it did. Do they know when it hit approximately?
Yeah, I've heard upwards to 10 million or even 100 million nuclear Hiroshima bombs, the equivalent of the energy, the force. But it was approximately 66 million years ago when this happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
the dinosaurs reigned for like 165 million years before that. So they were going along pretty well until this happened.
Yeah,
well, it was so interesting. Yeah, so there were two major extinctions, and one was at the end of the Permian, and that happened when in Siberia there were just lots and lots of shield volcanoes, and they caused a tremendous change in climate, and that eradicated synapses and other kinds of pre-dinosaur types. And then you had the synapses, and then the KT boundary, Cretaceous, Tertiary, nobody knew for years and years why that happened. And so the person that are doing the documentary about, you might tell us about him, James, found a few things that were keys to solving the puzzle.
Yes, and we are actually taking this to another level. We're going to make a feature film about it. We're still going to deal quite a bit with the science, but our hope is that more people will see it this way. And plus, there's a great love story behind it, and a spiritual search as well, all mixed together. But Mr. Penfield, who is the subject of the film, was searching for oil for Pemex Oil Company as a subcontractor. And at the time, they had state-of-the-art magnetometers. So they were flying these surveys above ground in the air, looking in the water and the ground to see what they call them signatures. And dense rock gives a different look than not so dense rock. So he saw something strange, and it kept attracting his attention. And so in the end, he became convinced based on the shape, the way it looked. It was perfectly symmetrical. He had other experiences prior to being there, even though he was only 27 at the time, and became convinced this was the crater. It's about a half to a mile underground, depending upon where you look, filled with 66 million years of sediments. And he became convinced this was the remnants of the crater that the asteroid impact that killed the dinosaurs and 75% of life on Earth at the time.
Well, and wasn't he one of the first to find that there was that the impact created a new kind of rock. And it was like glassy shards that were from this extreme impact and heat. And you could find them in certain layers, and like that one layer that was like a time marker.
That's correct. And that is the final piece of the puzzle that even he met with NASA a few times trying to convince them. And the final piece of the puzzle was if he could find this certain rock, which is called shock quartz. And they call it shock quartz because it has these streaks in it. The energy was so strong when this asteroid hit, the rock couldn't even handle the energy, and they have streaks in it. You only find shock quartz in 2 instances that I know of in the world. And one is either at a nuclear bomb detonation site or a meteor or asteroid impact site. So that was the smoking gun. When that was finally found, that was the ultimate piece of the puzzle that pretty much laid to rest the arguments where the crater was and what actually did kill the dinosaurs.
Now, is the crater mostly underwater?
It's half and half.
Half and half, okay.
But yeah, half and half. But right on the Yucatan Peninsula, just about half of it underground and half under the water.
Interesting.
You can kind of see the shape of it, yeah.
Excuse me?
It was huge. Yeah, huge.
Yeah,
you can
huge.
see the shape of it, yeah.
Like almost 108 kilometers wide, I think it is, and quite a big structure. And that was one of the things very interesting too, is when I got into this, and we have this in the film as well, that it's almost hypothesized that if it had been totally over land, it would have hit enough calcium limestone deposits to have not created such an impact. Had it been totally over water, it might have been so strong it might have killed everything, and there was no life left at all. It almost was the perfect hit, the perfect angle that allowed just enough life to progress afterwards.
Now, Susan, you've been to the site?
Well, I've been near it. I haven't been in it, but I'd like to. But I've been in the Yucatan Peninsula a few times, but I haven't actually been on a quest for the shock quartz. But I've attended a number of PEMEX presentations where they discuss that it kind of shaped the destiny of Mexico, not just with the creatures, but with the formation of oil, because it created, with that impact, so many structures, and also it created fractures, and then all the water could come in and do what it does, which is erode and create diagenetic alteration, and then it created places for oil to migrate and make enormous reservoirs.
Now, James, how do you prepare for doing a film like this? And just to be clear, this is still pre-production. You haven't started filming. I believe James is still looking for capital and funding for the film. So if you're interested, I guess we can put you in touch with that, because a lot of people here who watch maybe from universities could have funds and grants, and you never know. So we'll put James's information below, and feel free to contact him if you're interested in helping fund the movie or helping promote it in one way or another. It's a fascinating film, and when it comes out, I'm sure it's going to be quite fascinating. James, how do you prepare for a movie like this?
Well, the first thing was determining which aspect of this whole story I thought was most interesting. There's a lot of different pieces of the puzzle, but I was always drawn to Glenn Penfield because he was the center of it. He did actually find it. There's been a lot of circumstantial evidence to help bring it, confirm this as well. So the first thing was contacting Glenn, which was not an easy task in itself, but we finally did get together, and then I met him. He lives outside of Houston, so I flew there, and we had a nice lunch, and he was all for it. He thought it'd be a great chance to educate people about science and things of that nature. So once Glenn and I worked out an agreement, then the next step was getting together and hiring a screenwriter. So we have our script is written. It's written by a fellow named Kevin Bernhardt. He's probably had over 34, I think it's closer to 40 now, screenplays actually made into movies.
Right.
So he really knows how to write. He's right there in the Los Angeles area.
Okay.
So Kevin got quite involved, and he really loved the story, did a lot of research as well, and we think we have a really fine script written here.
That's great.
I'm
So
sorry.
and I'm sorry, Susan, but like anything else, in the training arena, you create a script, a storyboard, something to set the parameters. And movies aren't all that much different. We do a lot of corporate video here, and it's the same idea. You set it up, you write, you get your ideas of what you want, what kind of shots you want to do. You put your scripts together, add more shots after that, and eventually you have a video production. And it can be simple, it can be complex, but ultimately you're left with something that is cinematic, if you will, something that has hopefully some emotion, something to make people remember what it was all about. And you've made more than one movie already. You've made quite a few movies. How do you enjoy the process? How different is it from processes you had before, as for example, as a civil engineer? I mean, lawyers spend a lot of time researching, investigating. A lot of people think lawyers spend all their time suing people. Actually, that's probably the least of what they do. Most things never even make it to court. There's a lot of arbitration. There's a lot of things that happen. How does this change what you did before? In other words, is your process similar? As a civil engineer, you've got a certain process that you use. Is it similar to what you're doing now with videos?
I think it's very similar. And I was always more involved in construction. And I remember when I purchased a screenwriting program to start a screenplay on it wasn't used, but it was for the Brazilian healer film we did. I was just amazed at how similar the whole layout was that folks in construction used to schedule. So it is very, very similar. I'm always inspired that we remember Frank Capra, the director who's so famous for so many movies like A Wonderful Life. He was a chemical engineer from Caltech.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, prior to his getting involved. So yeah, the analytical part, the creative part, it's all very similar. I find film even more enjoyable and challenging just because it's a beautiful product when it's finished. It's
and it's a lot of fun creating it. Whenever we've done movies and videos, there's just a real fun part of starting it, creating it. And of course, people think videos are linear. No, a lot of times you film sequences totally out of order because maybe you're in one location today, then tomorrow you're in a different location. Those locations may have nothing to do with the film beginning and ends. It's wherever you are and saving some money on budget and everything else. But it is fascinating and it's a lot of fun. And you've created movies from beginning to end. And you've also had the pleasure of seeing them make it either to the big screen or other areas. You mentioned earlier you have another movie called Ping Pong
Summer. I was
Summer,
one of
sorry.
the producers many on that, yes.
And that's on Amazon.
You can find that on Amazon. It's a fun, lighthearted coming-of-age comedy film. It's based. The writer and director used to go to Ocean City, Maryland as a kid on vacations, and so this is a takeoff of his experiences in Ocean City. And the whole movie was about ping pong. And so everybody pretty much who was a part of the movie or even the cast and crew, including Susan Sarandon, loved ping pong. So it was just a fun venture.
That's great.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Well, I really loved what Rick was asking you about the actual production and the process of it. And I think that's incredibly valuable to know, especially in using videos in e-learning. But something that you mentioned is fascinating to me, and I just haven't quite, I'd love to ask you about this. What exactly is the love interest with the asteroid impact?
Well, when Glenn Penfield, the subject is of the movie, who discovered this crater and was not believed for many years, met his wife there. He was 27. She was, I think, around. Yes. So she was born and raised in Mexico. So they eloped. Subsequently, did in the U.S. years later. Solidify that in the U.S., but they eloped against her parents' wishes, I think, at the time. But they've had it's a part of the movie is the intertwinement of their relationship, because they had many, many good years, but some of this took its toll on Glenn, and they had a low point, and that is part. So this whole story about his finding the crater and getting people to believe that he actually had it. Is the intertwine with the love story, and they both come out in the end, and they're still very, very happily married.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that there's a spiritual part too. Do you think that had to do with anything physical well, I'm thinking of the shocked quartz creating all these vibrations, but anyway.
Well, that's a good point. One never knows for sure. That very well could be, the Mayan culture and things of that nature. But Glenn began this whole venture. He was there in Mexico looking for oil, and he was a devout agnostic. And through this process, some things happened to him, and he became a deep believer in God. And he sees, one of the messages of the film too is there. At least from his perspective, there is no conflict with pure science in spiritual experience.
That's an interesting point, because a lot of scientists are very religious. And I remember when I was young and I was studying engineering, I used to think, well, how can you combine the two? They're totally different. But they're not. They're actually very tied together, because what does science do? Try to make sense of sometimes what's nonsensical, if you will, things that don't make sense, and science still can't quite get to. If you look at quantum physics, they're starting to. It's so out there sometimes that it's not that far different from what we're all talking about, and it is really, really fascinating. A lot of people talk about quantum consciousness, but I keep saying, well, if it's quantum consciousness, it's really teeny. People forget what quantum really means, but they use it as a buzzword. It's like, no, quanta are teeny little particles. It's smaller than nanoparticles. And people go, huh? But I thought when you have quantum, your consciousness is expanding. Yeah, then you must have a lot of quanta, because they're really teeny particles. But what they're using that to say is that they're discovering in our brain, for example, the Aborigines in Australia. Their concept of time is fascinating. All time is now. All time intersects in streams of time, but it's always now. Past, future, present is now. And for years, people have always said, I'm in the moment. I go, well, you're nowhere. They look at me like, well, what do you mean? You can't be in the moment, because the moment is so infinitesimally small, it probably can't even be measured. It's a stream. It's an absolute stream for time. It's not a moment. You may be in a zone, but that's not a moment. It's different. And people get all bent out of shape about that. But there's a lot of myths about time and this and that. And ultimately, when you say that science and religion have or not religion, I would say not religion, because that's a whole middleman problem that goes on there. Right. But the concept of God or energy or a force or something is really quite fascinating. It
is very.
It's incredible.
And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say also the way the spiritual part kind of interplays somewhat in the story, and it is all based on true. Glenn and Aaron. Aaron is Glenn's wife. They totally opened up and have been very involved in the script. But I see it as a metaphor. The asteroid came and hit the Earth, and it was a hugely destructive but creative destruction. Mm-hmm. it wiped out the old and allowed the new to flourish. And people say, but for that happening, we probably wouldn't be here today talking as in human form. So with Glenn's experience, spiritual experience, it was kind of similar to what, as the asteroid was to the Earth, his spiritual experience was to him. It kind of wiped out the old and started a whole new evolution for him.
That's a great metaphor.
Yeah. Wow, that's super interesting. And it's almost like this big shock birth of a new era. It's like, wow. I mean, and in fact, I can just imagine if they were in that location when that happened, if they were extremely sensitive, it's like, it makes you wonder. I mean, like you were talking about the Maya culture. I mean, it just makes you wonder how much was just uniquely there because of that impact and the way that it affected everything. Like the magnetic fields, everything.
Well, there are many places around the world where supposedly energies are different, whether it's probably electromagnetic energies or fields or whatever. There's places all over the U.S. that people are attracted to, or they feel they sense something. I remember when I was in Argentina, there's a southern part where people would be very attracted to the energy there. I think it was called Bolson or something like that. There's a lot of places like that all over the world. It's supposedly in Russia and other places. Again, and interestingly enough, some of those places have if you look at it, there's a commonality with heavy rock structures, mountains, craters, among other things. I once went to Crater Lake. I don't know if you've heard of that one. Susan, have you been there?
I haven't been there, but yes, I've heard of it.
It's quite fascinating. I was just asked by two friends, you want to come up? We're going to Crater Lake this weekend. Okay, good. You're driving. Thanks. I was the driver. But no, it was actually a beautiful place, and it was a perfect circle. I don't know much about the size of the asteroid that hit it or whatever else, but it's a perfect circle, and the water there is so immaculately clean. It reflects, it's almost like glass. It's really pretty. And it's just a lovely, lovely place. And there's a certain feeling there that it's extremely calming. Could that be a vibration and energy? I don't know. But it felt very calming, and you just felt like it at peace almost when you were there. It was a very nice feeling. And there was definitely an energy to the place. And they didn't push that part of it. They didn't even talk about that. But it was something that was feelable. It was definitely something that became cognizant to someone who was there, that what a place to be. And I can imagine what Susan's saying about this crater, the same thing, that it definitely must have some energetic, even after all those millions of years. That doesn't mean anything. That energy probably doesn't leave.
Right.
Well, geologically, it wouldn't, and in fact, it would potentially intensify over time, because if it created fissures and fractures that communicated with lower, different layers, even as far as in the mantle. Like, okay, so you're talking about Crater Lake in Oregon. Yeah. Was it an impact crater?
It was impact. I believe it was impact.
Oh, wow.
I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
And it must have come straight, literally in almost a perpendicular shot. Boom. And it's a perfect circle. That's the interesting part about it too. And I don't know how deep it goes. And they said the water is very cold, especially, during winter, it ices over, but, it is the cloud formations, everything around it is just very, very pretty. It's just almost like its own microclimate. So, and it's not enormous. It's not something that would take hours to go across. It looks, I can't even say how big it was, but it's definitely not the size of an enormous crater. It's probably maybe a city block or maybe more. Maybe it looked like it just wasn't that big from our angle. We were pretty much almost right on it, but we didn't go around or that close to it. It was already getting into winter time, and not everything was open where you could actually do that, but it was beautiful.
I keep thinking that there must be some really, really weird vibration around New Jersey, parts of New Jersey, because he laughed.
Joyzy, huh?
But it's really unique in terms of really, really dark, iron-filled, like, well, minerals that are from just to put it in simple terms, just from the hottest, darkest part of the earth, and they're unique. Yeah, and they're really dense, and magnesium, iron, and so I just keep thinking, I'll bet there's some kind of weird vibration in there.
Yeah. James, when do you think you'll start production on the movie?
We hope by mid to end of next year.
Okay.
That's what we're shooting for.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, definitely. We wish you the absolute best on that. It sounds like a really fascinating story. I'm looking forward to seeing it for sure.
Thank you very much.
And
we're excited about it.
No, and it's great because I love the way you've tried several subjects together too, which like not only make it interesting from like Susan loves a geological perspective, but the whole energetic, spiritual, people perspective. It's just I would say you probably have a winner on that one. Just from what you're saying, it sounds extremely interesting. I remember reading the book. I think it was called The Celestine Prophecy years ago. And that was done by a guy who was doing research. I think it was in Peru. And tied it together to, there was some political turmoil. There was this, that, and how it all somehow tied together to some mystical knowledge. It was interesting. It was actually an interesting series of books. He based a lot of it on coincidence. How we go through life, but everything that's coincidence isn't really maybe. And it was an interesting concept, and it could very well be true, because we've all noticed that things happen sometimes when we need them to happen or when we least expect them to happen. What brings that about? Who knows?
That's very interesting you say that, because that's another part of the theme of the film is Glenn seemed to be the perfect person at the perfect place at the perfect time.
I know.
Because his background was such that as a kid he loved dinosaurs. Later, after that, he got totally into astronomy, and then of course he was the geologist, and he had read some things that opened his mind to the possibility of mass extinction. Yeah. And you think, at least from the perspective of the film, it's like not many people in the same position would have accepted it for what it was.
No, and so one thing, and that's interesting.
It ties back to what you were saying, is that energetically or coincidentally, it was almost like he carried the energy and was drawn there, or whatever.
Yeah, I remember that movie Close Encounters of the First Kind, where Richard Dreyfuss is drawn. He can't stop drawing this thing. He can't stop, and all of a sudden it happens. It was a well thought out film in terms of that part of it. It was interesting. But of course, if you look at the human race right now, we're so excited about seeing craters and stuff and how real extinction happens. We're trying to duplicate it as humans. Just, I think we're on some sort of suicidal pact sometimes to destroy ourselves. It's just like, ay. But anyway, that's a whole other story for another time.
Yeah,
James,
that is part of it. Go ahead.
Yeah,
that
go
is
ahead.
part of it as well. As before this, NASA didn't pay too much attention. Now, as you know, and you see it in the news quite often, there are so many experiments on trying to stop it from happening again.
Right, but they can't.
Yeah.
When it happens at that level of energy and force, I don't think there's enough nuclear or other rockets, if you will, missiles, that could stop an object from hitting us at that speed with that force. At least not now.
Yeah, I don't think they have it down yet either.
No.
If they ever do.
They probably miss and go, darn.
Well, we're in the time of asteroids, and I think we're going through the asteroid belt, and so we're seeing lots of meteors. I think, I can't remember which belt we're going through. I think it's part of old Halley's Comet, but at any rate, I think October, November, are the months for seeing lots of, at least in North America, for seeing
Interesting.
lots.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, James, we wish you great success on this video and all other ventures you do. It's been a pleasure meeting you today, and I'd love to keep in touch with you and talk some more about these things. We can do that off interview. Also, I'd love to. Well, we can talk about this right after the show, but for now, I hope you folks enjoyed this show. It was definitely different, and keep your minds open as to not only training and learning, but look at what you can get out of things like this and how you can learn from so many different ways and so many things. So we look forward to seeing you next week on eLearnChat. Have a good one, James. Again, a great pleasure. Stay on for a moment, and we'll be right back with you. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.